Welcome to the VALR Podcast. It's lovely to have you with us. Very excited to have Jeff Yan over here with us as well. He is no stranger to many of you, maybe the first time that some of you are hearing from him. So we're in for a great conversation. Very briefly, Jeff Yan is the co-founder and public face of Hyperliquid, one of the fastest growing decentralized trading platforms, blockchains. We'll get into what Hyperliquid is in a moment. Before Hyperliquid, Jeff studied mathematics, computer science at Harvard, worked in quantitative trading at Hudson River Trading. And as many of you know, Hyperliquid has since become known for its high-performance on-chain order book, self-custodial perpetual futures exchange, custom layer 1 blockchain, and a very, very community-oriented approach. So Jeff, very, very welcome to you, and thanks for making the time to be here.
Thanks for having me on, Farzam. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to discuss what you guys have been working on as well.
Thank you. So maybe just on that note, what a few comments about what led to this particular podcast. So VALR will be coming out with a press release in the next few days, depending on when this is actually published, along with Hyperliquid. And some very exciting stuff that we've been doing. We're going to be bringing many markets to our customers, and particularly with the liquidity of Hyperliquid on many of the perpetual futures markets. So we're very excited about what that means. And VALR right now, as some of you may or may not know, is the largest crypto exchange and infrastructure provider in Africa. We actually already do spot margin, perpetual futures ourselves. We've also one of the largest, or if not the largest, stablecoin provider on the continent. We've processed over $20 billion worth of stablecoins through our wallet infrastructure over the past year. And we're actually investing much more into the payment space and movement of value for our customers. And so we'll be having some announcements about that relatively soon. But for today, really excited to kind of bring Jeff onto the show to discuss a little bit more about kind of what he's doing and who he is, to get to know the person a little bit better. But before we do that, maybe the first question I'll ask, because I'd love to get to know you, Jeff, a little bit better, is really that, you come across, and maybe to say to all of our audience members, is that there's actually a lot of information out there about Jeff, many podcasts, which are wonderful to hear. So we'll try to kind of ask a few questions, or I'll try to ask a few questions that are a little bit different to what we've been hearing out there. But I'd love to get to know you, Jeff, particularly. You come across as someone that emphasizes values and integrity. Where do you think you actually get those values in your life? Where do they come from?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's hard to know, because I think sometimes values are it just feels like for as long as you can remember, you've just kind of been like that. I think I guess my mom was an immigrant to the US. And so I guess growing up, I was no stranger to hard work and, fair work. I think my mom really, as a single parent raising two children, I think she was working full time and overtime as an accountant. And I think that just seeing that, I guess, it instills some kind of value system where it's that the world doesn't owe you anything, that, maybe life isn't the fairest to start. I mean, she worked very hard to make sure that her children had as much opportunity as they could compared to their peers. And I think we're very grateful for that. I think it's a very common immigrant story, but it's like no one owes you anything, and at least certainly no one owed her anything, and she had to kind of fight her way, kind of struggle her way through those decades of life, and that was inspiring.
And then what are some of the pivotal moments in your childhood that you felt led you to where you are today? And there was, for the for the listeners, there's a fantastic article by Colossus. If you just look up Colossus and Jeff Yan, there's a really long, well-written article. Jeff, you also mentioned how they've done a really good job in writing that. So there's
Dom put a lot of work into that. So
yeah, there's a lot there. So
if it reads well, it's because of him, you know.
So are there any specific, I know you talked about your mother and the fact that she was really instilling humility into you, but are there specific elements? And I'm also asking as a father of two children, what are the things that you saw as a child that led you to where you are today? Is there anything that stands out?
Well, yeah, in the Colossus piece, I guess I kind of talked about how there was kind of a transformative moment when I realized that there was that sort of the world could respect people for their accomplishments as sort of intellectual accomplishments. It sounds kind of dumb, but I just didn't really realize that for the first, call it 10, 12 years of life. And I think that really clicked for me. Like that was really cool because I think I was, before that, I think I was trying to be really good at sports, but it was hard for me. Like I was okay, but then I'd be like pretty fast among my friends, like running track, but then I'd go to like a local track meet and would be like completely smoked by someone like didn't break a sweat. And so it was cool to see that. I think that was a pivotal moment in my childhood, just realizing that you can build things and kind of use your mind and really just like create value in the world.
Awesome. Beautiful. And now looking forward, kind of your childhood, where you are right now and looking forward, like we'll get to Hyperliquid in a moment, but what are your personal aspirations for life and kind of what are the values that drive you or that you hope to make manifest in the world, just on a personal basis?
I mean, right now it is just Hyperliquid. I think there's just like so much to do. It's kind of all consuming. It's been all consuming ever since the beginning. And I kind of feel like it's gotta be like this. This is probably just what everyone who's, early to building something in the world, who really believes in the vision. I think this is like a common thread. Maybe the only common thread is that you kind of have to have this obsession with building it, and it can't go away. Like if that dies, then I think that the product kind of goes with it. And so I think that's like a very common attitude, but it kind of leaves not much room for anything else. I kind of don't. The days are a blur. It's really just
single focus right now.
Yes.
Awesome. Talking about single focus,
so it would be cool to talk about like what you guys are, how you guys are integrating with Hyperliquid. I think that's something I don't know if I can ask some questions, but I feel like I'm actually curious how, what you guys.
You're very welcome.
You guys here and your journey to kind of this podcast, like how did you guys Hyperliquid and make it
sure happen? So VALR, as mentioned, so we're about 8+ years old now. So we're a South African centralized crypto exchange, and we'll talk a little bit about that and DeFi in a moment, because obviously you're coming from the DeFi space. We're a CeFi, a centralized finance entity. I really love a lot of the values you stand for, because that's what's inspired a lot of what VALR is. We have, luckily not been tainted or touched by any of the shenanigans that have happened in crypto over the past 8 years. And mostly because we've taken a very conservative view of counterparty risk, right? And we have seen that a lot of people were burned in yield, whether it was Celsius and things of that nature, or BlockFi, or obviously FTX. And so we've always kind of taken a very conservative view of building in-house. So all of our wallet infrastructure is our own, all of our trading engines, liquidation engines, all of that infrastructure we've built in-house ourselves. and really to insulate us against things that we may not have insight into, right? So that's worked very well for us. I think what brought us to Hyperliquid is, you guys have had phenomenal success, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And speaking very candidly, we had great success with our spot markets. We're the largest czar to crypto marketplace in the world. Binance and others are also in South Africa, but our czar to crypto markets are the largest in the world, the most liquid in the world, that have the most volume. We also introduced spot margin trading to have leverage on that, which I mentioned, which took a lot of time again to build all of that infrastructure. And then we also launched perpetual futures. Now, our perpetual futures markets, they're there, but as you know, perpetual futures are much larger in terms of volume than spot markets globally. But we didn't see that take off on VALR as much as we saw our spot markets and our spot margin markets. And so we still have them there. They're on our platform. We're doing a few $1 million a day on those markets, which is small in the grand scheme of things. And we obviously want to grow that. But one of the biggest things, as you know, is liquidity on any type of a market. And so we've been looking at Hyperliquid and really, really enjoying how fast and how big Hyperliquid has grown and how deep the liquidity has been on Hyperliquid. And as you probably know, liquidity is something on centralized order books that you really need to put a lot of effort into. You have to pay market makers to come on to make sure that customers are getting a good deal, that the spreads are not too wide, that they can execute trades, with size that do not lead to slippage on the order book. And so we thought, well, Hyperliquid's done a fantastic job creating a tremendous amount of volume and liquidity across a whole bunch of different markets. Does it make sense for us to keep trying to build our own when there are many great players in this space? Or should we go straight to really deep liquid markets, provide a huge number of markets to our customers, and effectively offer a service to our customers that doesn't have what you guys have from the perspective of a support infrastructure? So obviously Hyperliquid doesn't have a support desk that you can call into and say, hey, I've got an issue. Can you please help me? Whereas VALR does. Like, we have our own customers, we have our own distribution, we have, now I think we've just crossed the 1.9 million mark on VALR of total signups. So that's kind of what brought us here, which is to say, our aspiration is really to serve humanity, right? Is to take the world forward, particularly the financial system, because it has failed much of humanity, particularly from the emerging market perspective. A lot of the more sophisticated products, or even the basic products, if you think about payments, it's so expensive, particularly in Africa, where you can get up to 20% fees on a particular transaction, just sending some money from point A to point B. It's almost criminal, like how much people have to pay. So we don't have any ego from the perspective that it needs to be us and we need to do everything. The reason that we have done a lot of the stuff that I talked about earlier was just to protect our consumers and protect ourselves. But over here, there was a beautiful platform in Hyperliquid that had a lot of the liquidity that we needed. And so we decided to just plug into you guys. And we'll see when this goes live, but we're launching close to when this podcast goes live. But that's kind of the backstory, if you will. So let me pause there, see if you have any questions about that, and then I'll get to asking you some more questions.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there, but I mean, so much of what you said resonates with me. Just like it's so interesting that I think the problems in the world are so simple but so profound, and people approach them from different ways, right? Like you said, we build, you build for your users in a way that protects them, and I think that's clearly worked, and that being the largest exchange in the continent is obviously like a tremendous accomplishment. And I think the fact that Hyperliquid, same goals but completely different stack. Your ambitions are beyond trading, right? Like payments, etc., like settlement, just moving value from point A to point B. I think that that's like exactly how we think about it. But like these two approaches to solving these fundamental problems in humanity and like improving the coordination of human behavior and fairness in the world, and sort of like converging upon like an integration between, I think, the first of its kind, like a centralized exchange using DeFi or on-chain markets backbone for perpetual futures, I think is a tremendous milestone. I think we're going to look back at this and say, wow, like that, this really was a turning point. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just, on behalf of our team and the community and like we're just humbled that and honored that you guys, chose Hyperliquid and, saw kind of like, I know it's not easy to build, and that's the first example of something, but that you kind of saw enough value there and stuck with it and devoted the resources. I think we're super excited to support the launch or to have supported the launch whenever this airs.
Thank you so much. Actually, I talked to the team earlier and they were talking about how it was a great integration. Like there's some integrations that are very painful, but they said that the integration with Hyperliquid was great. The infrastructure to build upon Hyperliquid was great. So big congratulations to you and your small team, I might add. Are you guys still at 11 people on the team?
At Labs, yes, but I really view the team as,
of course, the larger team is much bigger.
Right? Like I don't think it's a fair comparison. Like when you compare your, like you said, your team needs to build, support and, I assume marketing, compliance, all these things, and then we kind of, every department, other than maybe engineering, like the core engineering, I think you can point to someone in the ecosystem or a builder or a deployer and say like, oh, that if we're being fair as a comparison, like that really is part of the team too.
Thank you. And so I didn't realize, because I knew we were probably one of the first, but it sounds like we may be the first centralized exchange that's kind of plugged directly into Hyperliquid as a DeFi backend. I think I was listening to one of your podcasts recently, and somebody actually asked you whether you think this will happen. This was a few months ago, and your response is that it would happen within a year. So I think your prediction on that is correct. So congratulations on that.
I think I just say that every year though, so it's you can't give me too much
credit. No, I think actually maybe I've got a whole bunch of questions for you, but maybe we'll go straight here, which is kind of CeFi and DeFi, right? So when people ask me about the future, actually a lot of investors, when I talk to a lot of investors, we have VC money. Obviously, you guys are well known not to have taken any VC money. But whenever I do talk to investors, a lot of their questions come about Hyperliquid specifically and decentralized exchanges and how I personally see this evolving. And my response, and I'd love to get your response to my response and how you see this world going, is I do say that, the world is changed so much over the past 20 years where for the first time, people can actually hold digital assets in a self-sovereign way where they don't have to have an intermediary to help them in crypto. But VALR is an intermediary, right? So why are we there? And my response to that is that a lot of people still want a little bit of hand-holding. They want to be able to call the support desk. They want to be able to reset their password. They don't want to hold their own private keys, right? So the beauty about the world that we're in is that people have choice, right? If people want to go purely DeFi, they can do that. If they want to go and have somebody else to hold their keys, they need to do that. I think one of the things that people don't fully explore or properly is the fact that there are risks in all of these models. And I think the main thing is understanding what the risks are and making sure they're appropriate for your risk appetite, right? So I'm really excited about this entire ecosystem. When I say ecosystem, I'm talking about CeFi, DeFi, kind of moving towards progressing the world forward. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you view DeFi and CeFi and how you think the evolution will look in the future.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are many angles to the question. I think the one you mentioned is key, and I think, I think maybe the freedom of money and independent sort of self-sovereignty doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be risky for the user. I think it can obviously be the kind of purist Bitcoin OG mentality where it's like, your private keys written down or like committed to memory and you'll kind of go to the grave with like, you can be like that, but I feel like that's like a very, very, very few people in the world. And I think there's a whole spectrum of solutions. Like, for example, you can hold your own key, but maybe there's a social recovery mechanism. And it's, so if you lose your key, it's not like everything's gone. You just kind of go find a few trusted individuals, a distributed set of trusted individuals, and they can together recover your key. But to the extent that you don't forget your key or lose it, you can move your own money around. So I think it's still kind of like the kind of you can kind of have your cake and eat it. And I think these solutions will only get better over time. I think there are other axes too that are also interesting and maybe not discussed as much. Sort of the VALR integration on the Hyperliquid rails is a good example of this, where I think things are going, which is that I think on-chain finance really should be viewed in many cases not as something here to displace the existing financial system. Yes, the existing financial system has areas that need to be improved. I think that's true of all systems. And with finance, I think it feels so obvious because of there are some sort of entrenched inefficiencies. Like you said, 20% in Africa just to transact is absurd. Anyone using crypto will think that's absurd. Doesn't matter which network, which token, whatever you're transferring. 20% is crazy.
Absolutely.
But the fact that that's still there just shows how entrenched of a problem it is. And I think the solution there is not to just say like, well, everyone should just switch to these like completely new technologies, but rather can we preserve the interfaces, the APIs that the legacy or existing merchants and systems use. It's like the real world is messy, right? You can't just force everyone to switch cold turkey. You want to preserve the same interface, but swap out the rails. So really what you're doing is upgrading the financial system. And I think on-chain rails are just a 0-to-1 product improvement, in the same way that people used to trade in the pits, screaming over each other, like literally the tallest person gets the best fill, like that. Just a couple decades ago, I think that was maybe 3 decades ago, that was how trading was by and large conducted around the world. It's hard to imagine, but now it's, markets are electronic. And I think the next step really is the 0-to-1 improvement of going from centralized electronic backends, which are have inefficiencies, to decentralized self-custodial backends, which give individuals more freedom and sort of choice, like you said, in their financial lives. So I think that story is slowly unfolding. I think it's taken time. Crypto has been around for more than a decade, but these things really take time. And I think finance is so important to people. It's like money is one of the most core parts of most people's lives. It's not something people want to really experiment with. It's right. Because it's so core to their existence and survival that it really, I think the protocols need to be battle tested before these transitions can be made. But I do think there's going to be, once it is made, there will be an inflection point. There will be an exponential, because for billions of people in the world, this is going to unlock a ton of value.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the inflection point. You're talking about more going into DeFi, or what does that inflection point look like for you?
I think the existing system realizing that it's actually very simple to plug into these backends. Like, instead of maybe your story, is a good question for you, but like, when you integrate a perps backend where you guys kind of have full control over the product suite, you can control the fees, you can control the interface, you control the user flows, kind of really everything. And the system's just there to work and to provide the liquidity as infrastructure. I think like when that clicks for people around the world, like whether it's brokers, interfaces, applications, exchanges, I think this light bulb moment is gonna kind of push everyone to just do it. And I think it's actually not that hard to do once you realize that there is value in doing it, because you're really kind of saying, well, let me focus on what I do best as a builder, as a merchant, as an exchange, which is knowing my customers and bringing them the best experience and growing my customer base. And this other stuff, like, why don't we all reinvent the wheel? Kind of, it's a hard wheel to invent. Like you said, bootstrapping liquidity is hard. Absolutely. Let's just use some neutral protocol that provides that cheaply, and then let's focus on the fun part, which is the part that we do well. And I think that is the exponential that I'm.
Got you. So we are about half an hour in, but it's time to talk a little bit about what Hyperliquid actually is. So I know there's a lot of information out there, But at a very brief level, like what, in your own words, what is Hyperliquid and what have you guys built, as labs and then the broader community?
So our tagline is infrastructure to house all of finance. And I really do feel like today I want to hone in on the infrastructure bit just because it's so topical for VALR's kind of historic integration. Really don't want to. I keep pounding it home, but I really feel like it's a big deal, and I'm excited to kind of kind of shout it to the world. But Hyperliquid really is. I think people view it as an exchange, and I think that is an aspect to it. Like certainly, like people probably use it through an interface, and that interface to them feels like has many exchange-like properties that they're kind of probably came from some other exchange, and now they maybe use Hyperliquid, a specific interface of Hyperliquid, because they feel like it's a better product. But really, when you ask what Hyperliquid itself is, it is more than whatever specific interface or application a user is viewing. It really is liquidity infrastructure. So in the same way that I like to use this analogy of AWS. It's not perfect, but it has sort of many features, and it kind of immediately paints a vivid picture in people's minds, which is that many startups before AWS were reinventing the wheel. They were acquiring their own server racks, kind of managing their own power bills, like swapping out computers as they broke, and just really like building the same thing over and over again and struggling with it. And I think when AWS came around and said, hey, like we'll handle that, like that's hard and not customer facing, and frankly just like not that interesting to most people who want to build some like a product. Just like let us do that, but we'll just focus on this one thing, do it the best for everyone in the world, so that we have like 99 point, I don't know how many nines of uptime they have, and the world's a better place for it. I think they've created a ton of value. They kind of like allow this startup boom where a team of a couple, like a one product person and one engineer can go to a hackathon and build something end to end and like serve it to users. I think like that was a huge unlock, and I really feel like that's the vision of Hyperliquid is that the same thing that AWS did for computers and servers and I guess now GPUs and things like that, Hyperliquid can do for liquidity, ledgers, deployments, tokenizations of RWAs, etc. It's the kind of financial analog to that. So it's a liquidity layer on which anyone can build. And there's an additional benefit here, which AWS does not have, which is why I think it's not a perfect analogy, which is that liquidity begets liquidity. And so there is a kind of compounding effect where, although there are disparate integrations, when VALR plugs into Hyperliquid, and let's say someone like Phantom, for example, they were analogously to VALR, they were the kind of first in a category of consumer wallet plugging in, and this was last year. And these plug into the same liquidity, and I think when flow kind of hits the same markets, all the customers benefit from tighter spreads and thicker liquidity. Like you said, Hyperliquid is actually has the most liquid Bitcoin per books, just full stop. That as last I checked. So this is because there's so many disparate users plugging into the same markets. So I think it's very beautiful, and I think as that scales, I think it will really benefit everyone using it.
Beautiful. So let me ask you a little bit more about that. You talked about, you often talk about housing all of finance. Obviously a very lofty goal. Is this something where you are one of the houses, or is this a winner takes all type of situation? And then what does that mean for others that are trying to build similar things? Like one could say that, Ethereum has been trying to build similar things. Obviously they don't have, the perpetuals and the order books and on-chain order books and things of that nature. But how do you envisage this? Do you think, or is the aspiration that like Hyperliquid will just consume everything and there'll just be one, kind of one platform here, or are there going to be several?
And maybe to clarify, house, I think it's like a very inclusive house. It's like a build the house so that finance can come and use the technology, but really like what are people building? That's who are the customers, who's kind of creating the value and also building the the empires, the businesses on top of it, it really is the same people that are doing it today. So it's not meant to like, I don't think Hyperliquid is really meant to put any specific business out of business. Like that's the interesting thing, because I think mostly when there's a startup, I think there's, or when you're like pitching a VC, I assume one of the things a VC asks you is like, oh, like who's your competitor? Who's your like biggest competitor or something like that.
Right.
It's kind of, it feels cool to be building something where you can point to things that maybe feel threatened by Hyperliquid, but I feel like that isn't how it is. Like, that's not how I think about it. I think of it as a technology that people can plug into, right? Like, for example, VALR is a centralized exchange. Like many centralized exchanges probably say, oh, that Hyperliquid thing, that's like so bad. Like they're like competing and taking market share. But that's one way to look at it. But you could also say, like, we can also just be the liquidity layer, and like many exchanges can come and build and plug in, and the exchanges haven't lost their users. In fact, they're probably offering a better experience to their users. Yeah. So I think it's a much more collaborative story than the kind of like fighting that is so common. Yeah, company building.
I love that, and I agree with it, but I think there will certainly be implications for other centralized businesses, other chains as well. Obviously, there are many other chains that are actually trying to catch up with Hyperliquid's progress here. So, I mean, I think maybe just to share my views a little bit. When I take a step back, there's so many projects happening in this space, which is beautiful. But I think we will look back at this time, and a lot of those projects will not be here at all any longer. Just because, to your point about liquidity begets liquidity. I think there are going to be a few liquidity pools, and I think that's healthy for an ecosystem to have a few liquidity pools. But there can't be like a tremendous amount of them, because then by definition you're diluting that liquidity across several different venues. And I think that goes for chains as well, where there are a lot of people that are competing, blockchains, to kind of get activity, to get people building on top of them, etc. So I think we will see a drop off with just chains themselves, tokens, etc. And I suppose the question to you is that when and I fully take the point that you guys are not competing, etc., but I think there will be casualties, right? CeFi and DeFi in this. And so let me just pause there, see if you have any comment to that, or if I'll move to the next question if you don't.
Yeah, I think there will be, in any truly competitive capitalistic economy or global interaction of economies, I think people will try things and they will fail, and I think that's healthy, and no objection to that.
Yeah. So apart from, let's say, volume, liquidity, what are some of the metrics that you look at, like on a daily basis, to kind of look at the evolution of the Hyperliquid ecosystem, and what are those? And it would be great to hear just some data about what you're looking at every day that represents the growth of the network and the growth of the platform and the growth of the ecosystem.
Yeah, this is you may be a bit disappointed by this, but I actually don't look at metrics all that much. I think metrics are important, but honestly, I think there are smarter people in the ecosystem who devote a ton of time to looking at metrics. So I actually look at all these pretty cool third-party dashboards. I can send some over, but I think off the top of my head, I know that Hydromancer has some really cool ones, and every time I look, they have some new ones, and it's quite interesting. So you can poke around there, and any metric you can think of, like some community member has made some cool dashboard, but I'm mainly focused on I think it's kind of weird, because trading is actually a very, like markets are a very quantitative thing, but I think day to day more about qualitative things. I think what we're trying to build is it's like mostly things that don't exist. I think you'll notice that whenever Hyperliquid does something, it's often like, even if it's based on previous ideas, it's at least some like relatively novel take on it. That's like we think it's like a 0 to 1 improvement, because we think if 10 people have already done this thing, then yeah, maybe Hyperliquid should do it to kind of at least give users sort of feature parity, but it's not that exciting, and it wouldn't be something we would kind of like devote our like all of our mind to. And so like, for example, HIP-3 was one example where I think, you know, it was the first sort of permissionless deployment structure. It's just like this concept didn't exist before, and it really is this, you know, I think VALR will probably also at some point, you know, as you scale, plug into more, you know, deployer markets as well. And I think it's like a really interesting synergy between all the different participants, the protocol, the deployer, the interfaces, the exchanges. So that's one example where it's like, when you think of like what the next thing needs to be built is, it can't really be informed by metrics if it doesn't exist already. And yeah, that's kind of like what I really obsess over. Okay. But you know, the metrics, it does ultimately reflect the metrics. So if you just look at any like, you know, like volume, trailing volume, like market, like sort of like percentage of total perps volume, percentage of volume on a specific asset, percentage of volume spot, percentage of you know, like sort of like liquidity comparisons, etc. Like, these are things that all kind of downstream benefit, but I think if you just like micro optimize these things, you don't actually you know, even if you care about the metrics, the right thing to do is to just like keep finding 0 to 1.
So let's talk about HIP-4 then. So HIP-4 is really allowing for outcome markets to flourish on Hyperliquid. There's a lot of beautiful benefits of outcome markets that allow finance to push forward with hedging or having options and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of my predicament here, which is to say, I want to bring more products and services to our consumers, but I don't want it to be a predatory product.
I would say a couple of things. So one, the outcome primitive, I don't think is not inherently tied to any subjective interpretation of it. It is, in my mind, it is like if you think about it at the protocol level, it's just a different margining system. That really is what it is. It's a different margining system, a different payout, right? It's like positions are fully collateralized, so there are no liquidations. It's in some sense the most well-behaved derivative you can design, which is that both sides, it's bounded, both sides put up the maximum possible loss, and then the thing settles according to some oracle off chain, and the thing just works. I think the second thing is that I think markets and speculation are sort of inherently tied, inextricable, and you can't, I don't think you can have the benefits of free markets without allowing speculation, because it's impossible to define. Like it's impossible. There's just always going to be a spectrum of sort of variance in outcome and expected value in outcome.
So when you think about HIP-4, beyond prediction markets, you've called it outcome markets. What else are you thinking about, and what are the types of products that you envisage that would really help promote the financial world for humanity?
In terms of like outcome markets, what beyond sort of binary markets, I think the obvious thing is options. I think options are really big in traditional finance. They have a really important function, which is to let people hedge in different ways. Like you maybe don't want to delta one hedge, but you just want some like extreme downside protection. And I think options are the standard way to do that. And there hasn't really been a breakout in on-chain options. And I think the main reason is that it's technically just like an inherently very hard product to build in a pre-funded way. So perps, on-chain perps, at least on Hyperliquid, are pre-funded. And I think by and large, this is kind of like an innovation within crypto that is actually, if you compare it, people take it for granted in crypto that when you open a perp position, you post the collateral. But this is actually not how traditional futures necessarily work. And this is actually a huge benefit to the kind of the resilience of the system during extreme volatility, that the positions are pre-funded. And I think options are actually like very difficult to build in that way, because market makers need to quote a variety of strikes and expiries, and you can't really expect reasonable liquidity if you put any sort of even remotely similar constraints on the collateralizations of market makers. And so I think outcome markets offer some kind of solution space for this, which is like let's try to build the best of both worlds here, where you can have similar payout curves, but also have the maintain the resilience of the system by pre-funding these positions. And so you don't get traditional options, but you get maybe something that people can coalesce around and say, this is the on-chain analog for the payouts we want.
Awesome. Moving on a little bit to emerging markets where we are, and there might not be any difference from your perspective, but I wanted to ask you in any case is, the things that Hyperliquid is building, the perps, the open, permissionless, kind of credibly neutral financial system. Do you kind of envision that having a unique role in emerging markets specifically? Is there anything that you kind of have thought about that, or is it just for the world?
I think it is for the world, but I think it's particularly felt in emerging markets is my guess. And it's a bit frustrating to me because I feel like the innovation in on-chain finance ironically starts in the developed world. And because it's like a tech startup kind of thing, and it's like it's ironic because the people who benefit most from it are actually the people who are a bit later to it. But I think it's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. But maybe in some alternate universe, like the power users are the people who benefit the most from it, and then in the new liquidity infrastructure layer, the ownership is actually like a lot more globally distributed than the existing financial system, ownership of the existing financial system, which is quite concentrated in the developed world. I think it's better, but I think it's not. I would have, liked to see it be even more kind of egalitarian. If you have ideas on that, happy to hear. But
sure.
I'm sure you guys will play a big role in this going forward.
Yeah, I think what we're building, I think there's going to be a lot of leapfrogging that we've seen in a lot of different technologies. Africa specifically, about 54 nations on this landmass, this beautiful continent called Africa, with so many different currencies, systems, so much friction across the continent. And so the reason I'm excited about what we're building, and when I say we, I'm talking about you, us, the entire ecosystem, is just that we're abstracting a lot of the infrastructure from the political obstacles that as humanity have been causing a lot of division rather than unity, right? So we're kind of saying, listen, there's a better way to do it. We've got the internet. We can just go directly on the internet. So there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of catching up when it comes to just like even in South Africa right now, we're going through a discussion with our regulators about the role of crypto in the economy and what that means, and how it relates with capital controls in South Africa, etc. So I think there'll be a lot of that, but I really there is let me try to find it here. It is such a beautiful quote that inspires me a lot. I think you'll appreciate it. Let me just quickly bring it up here. So yeah, here we go. This is from a quote in 1999, which is very beautiful. It's from the Baha'i International Community. It says that it would be difficult to exaggerate the psychological and social impact of the anticipated replacement of the jumble of existing monetary systems, for many the ultimate fortress of nationalist pride, by a single world currency operating largely through electronic impulses, right? And I love that because it's saying, we need a better financial system for the world, and for Africa specifically. We see this with so many frictions and so many costs. So I'm really excited about what the system will do for humanity, but particularly for for those that are having to pay the expense of so much friction in our current financial system. Speaking of that stablecoins. I wanted to understand your thinking about the role of stablecoins. Obviously, that's a big part of our business and moving stablecoins for our customers. Any high-level thoughts about stablecoins and the ecosystem and housing all of finance?
Yeah, so I do think, going back to the previous thing, I think that was a very prescient quote, and it's crazy that was, a full 10 years before.
It is crazy, right? Like whenever I look at, wow, that's awesome. Like 10 years before crypto started.
Yeah, very cool. And I want to say something. Oh yeah, you mentioned leapfrogging. I think that's like a really good analogy. I hope that's how it works, because I assume you're referring to how countries like India are kind of like mobile first. It's like they kind of skipped they skipped the landlines or they went straight to 5G or whatever, 4G, 5G. Yes. I think that would be like incredibly cool to see, because it's sometimes when you don't have as much legacy tech to kind of work with and integrate with and maintain backward compatibility with, you can be especially decisive and make sort of infrastructure decisions based more on first principles thinking. And I think that seeing that come out of Africa, I think would inspire everyone. I think like you said, so much friction, so much to improve. I think that just seeing that leapfrog to being like the forefront of decentralized ledgers, kind of underpinning finance. I think that'd be incredible to see. So yeah, going to stable coins, I think it's interesting, because I think Satoshi would not I don't think Satoshi was thinking about stable coins at all, and I don't know. My sense is that it's a bit of like he would be like, or they or whatever would be like, man, that's a compromise. I don't know. It's not pure. It's whatever. But I think the fact of the matter is, it's the product that people want. And you look, I don't think it's a failure of the system. I think it's just ultimately, like systems, financial systems, all systems need to reflect what the users want. And I think when users want to transact, I think this is just like a fact that people kind of didn't know. And I think now it's a truth that is known, which is that people like to transact in stable currencies issued by governments. And I assume that just will be the case for the foreseeable future. Like maybe not forever, but yeah. And I think to the extent that that's what people want, then kind of upgrading the dollar or rand or whatever stack, just upgrading it to be on 24/7 instant settlement backbone is just strictly better for the users. So I think it's really important.
Right now, to your point, this is something that's tremendously useful to society. A lot of people are using it. We're seeing it grow tremendously on VALR as well. In fact, interestingly enough, our largest books used to be Bitcoin, Rand books, but our stables have over the last few years just dramatically overtaken our Bitcoin books as well. So we're seeing that across DeFi, CeFi, everything with and of course we've seen the payments use case in a big way.
Curious on the payments point, do you think payments in Africa specifically, what's your prediction on how they work? Do you think they will just be denominated in some currency, maybe dollar, tether, or otherwise that sort of the market converges on? Or do you think it will be fragmented and there'll just always be this need to swap in and out of different currencies?
A great question. I think you have to kind of look at it from the perspective of coming from a good place, right? But I think ultimately that the will of the people prevails. And I think when we really take away the divisions of humanity and society, which is the man-made borders that divide us, particularly in Africa, where these borders were drawn by people in a different continent, a long time ago, and that really don't define the ethnic makeup of populations, as an example. I think ultimately people will migrate towards the most frictionless movement of value. That is going to be on a blockchain. I think we both believe that. I think right now it's going to be stable coins. I think we're going to see quite a little bit of resistance ahead of us, but I think ultimately it will resolve itself in the best technology, the most frictionless technology for the people. But it's better to actually have it on venues like VALR where there is transparency, and that people can express themselves in the way they want to express themselves, right? So I think I think there will be I think there's going to still be a bumpy road ahead of us, to be honest with you, from a regulatory perspective. But I do think that the resolution will be that humanity moves forward in low cost, high speed, and just a better financial system for Africa, for emerging markets, and for the world. So let me pause there, just see if you have any comments, thoughts.
No, I appreciate it. That's insightful. I'm not an expert in that space at all. So your thoughts.
Yeah. So last couple of questions, if I may. What are the biggest risks that you see to Hyperliquid, and the biggest are the worries that keep you up at night from an ecosystem perspective? And maybe one way to encapsulate that is, what is the fairest criticism that you see of Hyperliquid that you think the community should really take seriously?
I think a fair criticism that is maybe not unique to Hyperliquid, but maybe is sort of more apparent on Hyperliquid, is that I think crypto just, or sort of, finance, fintech, crypto, kind of needs to figure out a way to get more of the highest quality entrepreneurial talent. I think right now, specifically at least, it feels like if you're a fresh grad, just like with kind of like all the options in the world, and you just study computer science, or maybe didn't even study any, just like just drop out because you're so you can just like go build things yourself. I think very few of those people are looking at crypto or fintech and saying like, that's where I like see myself making an impact in the world. And I think that's something that it's very unfortunate, because I think ultimately that's what drives the success of the space. And
are you seeing that because of AI specifically, or just other things?
Yeah, I mean, it's AI right now, but before AI, I think it was, like, I think there's always been something, and I think maybe there was some, ironically, during the like worst time of crypto, when there were like, a bunch of scams, like maybe that's like sort of whatever, like just like these kind of like unscrupulous projects that's unironically probably like attracted the most attention. I think unfortunately, like the smartest people don't always actually know like what they would have the most impact doing. So if any one of you guys or girls are listening to this right now, maybe just I think the stuff that looks cool, like, there's obviously some kernel of truth to it, but I think really you ought to kind of like look at the world, kind of look at the problems, what interests you, but also like what are the real problems in the world, and what are you uniquely well suited to building, and maybe don't take things for like at surface value. So I think it's kind of like there's often a lot of social pressure to like do the things that everyone else thinks are prestigious to do. But I would say if you're interested in sort of high performance systems, distributed systems, sort of like rebuilding financial engineering from the ground up, from first principles, like think about how the economy ought to work. I think designing sort of markets at scale on a sort of much more like from like academic first principle concepts, taking it all the way through to production, like that is something that if you look at people who spend their lives dedicated to like thinking about these things and writing papers, like that's kind of like it's like such a like I think many of those people would have really appreciated like now just like this like sort of renaissance of on-chain finance happening, and I just feel like the young people today maybe like don't have that sense of like just how incredible the space is right now. And I think that, well, that's like a criticism, but also like something that we can kind of take as our mandate to really like spread the word and kind of bring the best minds, the best and brightest kind of into the space and grow it.
And I think we will probably see a few more crises ahead of us in the financial world. And I think people will see kind of the need for us to keep building and offering humanity a better system. And what's the last question I have for you? What is the thing that you're most excited about when you look into the future?
I'm just excited to see what labs, our team, but also the community. Just like I just know personally like how much hard work goes into each and every team, and like what they're putting into building, and I think it's just very hard. I think it's a tough world to kind of compete and really bring something of value to users. So I'm just excited to see, like much like yourselves, as kind of like working super hard on integrations and like putting together something that ultimately to the end user feels, like I really like that saying, which is that it's any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? It's like, and I think like that's the quality to which we strive, and I think that's the quality to which many teams and ecosystems strive. So like seeing that magic finally come to be, I think that's what excites me.
Beautiful. So yeah, I'm also very excited about, we're going to be bringing about 200 different markets to our customers based on our integration with Hyperliquid. Very excited about seeing that come to fruition. So I wanted to just thank you, Jeff, and the rest of the team, the community, for all the efforts of what you guys have been doing. One of the things that bothers me a lot about many ecosystems is kind of the us versus them, versus kind of building in unity to take the entire system forward. So I love the fact that we have this, centralized finance and decentralized finance coming together to provide what I hope will be a really beautiful offering to our customers. So thanks to the team. Please pass my thanks on, and thanks to you for making yourself available. Wonderful to chat. Maybe we'll do this again. We'll see what the future holds. But it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, Farzam.
Take care.
Looking forward to the launch.
Likewise.